Oh, this is so ugly. Oh, guys, I'm gonna have to sit up straight for this one. So we've got King 10 here, which is an easy fold. I'd also like to see a slightly smaller opening size. So King 10 here under the gun is pretty close. It's one of those, sometimes raise, sometimes fold hands. So if the lineup is very nitty, you want to end up raising a bit more often. If the lineup is very loose or aggressive, you want to be a bit tighter. So I'm fine with this fold. 8-7 here. Against a shorter stack, your hand doesn't play as well, especially with the big blind only having 18 big blinds, right? If you were to 3-bet to like 9 big blinds here and the big blind shoves 18, you'd have to call it off because you've put in half his stack. But then you'd have to put it in with 8 high. So I'd like to see you fold here. A hand like 8-7 suited is a very cool hand deep stacked, but short stacked not so much. Queen 8 easy raise, of course. And King Deuce suited against the 3x raise, I think you can just fold. And Queen 9 suited would be too loose, so you normally 3-bet. But if you're playing against somebody who's terrible, go ahead and isolate him. 3-bet for like, very thin value. Kick the good players out of the pot and play this guy in position heads up. But that guy didn't seem to have crazy stats. 10-9, I think with the rake we should just fold. If we had lower rake, we can consider a call. Well, kings were definitely not folding. And we see an ace-10 deuce flop with a rainbow. Obviously, this is a fantastic flop for us. You could end up betting big, but betting range 1/3 is standard. If the board were something like ace-king X, betting bigger makes a little bit more sense. And with the kings, we just got a 4-bet here. Yes, we could end up playing against aces, but villain is going to call our 4-bet with many, many worse hands. And even when he shoves, we're still ahead. I'd like to see you 3-bet here with ace-10 suited as well. Okay, I like it. And now villain didn't even have a full stack, and he 4-bets huge here, so I don't think he's really folding. He probably just has a hand like ace-king, and he's just raising, so, he knows he's priced in or something like that. Very easy fold. Had he 4-bet smaller, it would have been a more reasonable calling spot. And here with Queen 9 suited, we have no pair, we have no draw, we have no blockers, so easy check behind. We can just check behind, represent a hand like ace-9, and bet river, right? Like on this river, we would bet ace-9 on the flop, we would check the turn, and now we bet the river. So I would like to see a bluff here. Try to get villain to fold a hand like pocket 5s or 6s or 8s. Trying to get him to fold a hand like even a 10, maybe even a queen. Bitter for the sweet flop on ace deuce deuce. Obviously, this is an amazing board for your range because you're going to have aces every single time. You're also going to 4-bet hands like ace king and 4-bet bluff hands like ace queen or maybe like ace 5 suited or ace 10 suited. So you could just bet super, super small here. A lot of the time you have aces here and your opponent is just dead, right? Unless he has like 4 or 5 of clubs and he's got one out. So, meanwhile, Jean NL 3-bets the minimum. Normally, ace-queen would be a 4-bet or fold, but given that this player doesn't have a full stack and use the funny sizing, you have to think he's a recreational player, and I don't think he's folding to a 4-bet much, so I actually wouldn't mind just calling. But, I cannot recommend the last time I recommended calling ace-queen to a 3-bet. It happens, but not often. So, yeah, with kings here, just betting small. Makes sense. And, with you could have made him fold at king 10 for sure. Maybe he would have check raised bluff you. Maybe. So, I don't expect his range to be super strong. So, I don't mind 4-bet. I would actually 4-bet a little bit larger. And now you see this weak strategy by Sabaza. You bet here, your sizing is way too large in my opinion. You're betting almost a third of the pot. Going something like 5th pot is more than enough. The board is so locked down. If there were no flush drawn board, I'd be betting like 6th or 7th pot probably. The board is so dry and good for you. So, and now villain raises, right, which makes no sense. Yes, he could have aces as well to trap, but why would you raise? Yes, he could have ace king, but why raise, right? And you even block hands like king queen of clubs that might just raise to get it in. I think it's quite obvious that he just has a hand like ace king or a hand like ace queen suited, and he's willing to go with it. So, it's a bit questionable because you've got two kings in your hand, so you do block ace king. But I wouldn't be shocked if this guy just has aces, right? And if he has an ace, you're just almost crushed. And easy fold now with ace queen. He probably was trapping with hand like aces by min 3 betting. Man, getting aces again. What's this all about? Villain calls pretty quickly. Jack 5-3 is a board on which you can mix it up. So I really wouldn't mind any play. Betting is good. Check raise is good. Check call is good. Most recreational players are a little bit loose and passive, so the 5 and the 3 are also not that easy to hit. I wouldn't mind if you just bet small here. And now he min raises, right? So he quickly min raises. Tells me he probably has like some kind of decent hand, like, Jack 9 or something like that. Pocket sixes. I would just end up calling here. This hand is pretty good for the same reason that the previous aces were good on the 9-6-5 because, you don't really need protection. You block some of the gut shutouts. You're not afraid of facing over cards, so calling makes sense. If you believe he's got a lot of medium strength hands, I wouldn't hate this raise. Okay, so he probably min raise bluffed you. Fine with checking a7. Your hand does a great job of blocking your opponent's strong hands and ace queen and ace king and pocket sevens, of course. And now we just, once checked twice, we just end up checking here. 9-8 and okay, seems fine. 9-8 is a bit of a loose flat, but it's okay. And, giving up with ace deuce is not the worst play. So we check here on 10-9-9. In position shouldn't have too many 9s, even though we just saw somebody flat 9-8. So he'll have some maybe like 10-9s, 9-8s, maybe some hands like ace-9, king-9, but all of them at this kind of frequency. So I don't mind checking here and check calling. So he bets half pot. Okay, seems fine. Easy call. Maybe low frequency check raise and then check turn. The 6 is obviously not a fantastic card because villain could still bet 6s for half pot and he could have 8-7. At the same time, we unblock flush draws that he's going to bet turn with. He can have hands like king queen, king jack, queen jack. Maybe he'll have some random hands sometimes like ace 5, so, or some really random, maybe some hands like ace 7, ace 8. So if villain bets a reasonable sizing, we're just going to call the turn as well. And he pretty quickly checks behind. He could definitely have an underpair which got counterfeit. He can also have king jack, king queen that he decided not to bluff with, but you do have a king in your hand, so it's actually pretty close. I think all three options make sense again. I think betting makes sense. I think check calling makes sense. Check raising, not so much, right? So checking makes sense because he can bluff with queen jack, king queen. He can bluff with 5s, 4s, 3s, deuces, whatever random hand he's got. Betting makes sense because he could call with hands like 8s, 7s. Maybe he calls with hand like ace high now. So let's see what happens. And he has ace 10. Okay. So I would definitely make a note of this. I actually thought he was on the button, not in the cutoff. So my analysis would change slightly. Ace 10 offsuit is not a good hand to call in the cutoff. When you raise under the gun, you've got all the ace king, ace queen, ace jack combos, and he's just not doing very well against them. And if he gets squeezed, it's not a hand he can really call or re-raise. So yeah, his call is definitely too weak. So I would just write down like flats, ace 10 off, cutoff under the gun. So it's not a ridiculous call, right? It's not like he's calling 10-4 offsuit, which people sometimes do. So it's a loose call, but it's not an insane one. So if I were one of the remaining players, I would definitely be looking to squeeze this player because he's just too loose. Good fold with a deuce and a 3. Queen 10, it's sometimes a raise, and there was a big recreational player in the big blind, so you could have maybe raised that hand. Queen Jack 3, we're playing under the gun versus big blind, so I actually wouldn't mind seeing you size up. I understand why you're betting range 1/3. A lot of these players are tight. They don't really check raise. They don't apply pressure. But you're playing under the gun versus big blind, so I would have preferred a big bet there. I can't blame you, right? It's still, the board is still quite dry, so I don't hate it. King 4 I would end up defending. Before was King Deuce versus 3x. Now we're facing 2.5 and we've got a slightly better kicker. Yeah, I think we could defend that. Those suited kings play quite well. Okay, so when the small blind cold calls here, it's a bit different to a big blind cold calling range because the small blind is usually going to call hands like 7s and 8s and ace jack off and maybe ace queen off and like king 9 suited, you know, that type of stuff. And again, maybe he has 10 for offsuit as well, possible. But we have to be a bit tighter against the small blind range than against the big blinds range. So he's playing, you know, what was it, 26 or 28-14, which is not absurdly light, right? So it looks like we're actually going to end up bluffing with an underpair here, which is actually a pretty cool play. As in, we can have ace king here, we can have all the sets, the straights, the flushes. And it's difficult for villain to have a lot of decent hands, but not too many really, really strong hands. So I actually don't mind this. If you believe that Najim is a recreational player, I don't like this as much. I would not go for an overbet sizing. I think that's a bit much. You're clearly trying to represent ace king here. But I think you're kind of overplaying your hand a little bit here. So basically, I see you have a lot of great ideas, but a lot of them have to be sharpened up a little bit. I mean, come on, we can have all the sets and straights and flushes, and we overbet the turn, and now he just check raises to half his stack. Is it possible he's just got ace 10, ace jack with a diamond? Sure, but he might probably just has it. So just fold. I mean, we have pocket fours, right? We're even losing to his bluffs, so easy fold. So again, I like the idea of bluffing with underpairs, but your execution is a little bit off. King 7 deuce is obviously a great board for us, and we can bet. This player also doesn't have a full stack, so a bit more likely he's a recreational player. And on the deuce, I mean, we unblock both the nut flush draws that are going to continue. I'd like to see a bet here. We do block ace king, which kind of sucks. And when he calls it 3-bet under the gun versus small blind, he can definitely have it. So I don't really like this check too much. I think we should bet. I assume you're going to check raise all in, which wouldn't be the worst play. But I think villain is just going to check behind a lot of hands like 10s and jacks. But what do I know? Maybe you should be the coach. Easy shove. I mean, we get called by hands like ace king and king queen and maybe king jack and maybe some flush draws. And there's a lot of bad cards hitting. So even if he bet folds, it's not a disaster, right? But he put in over half a stack on the turn. Jack 8 we could have open raised. Would have been loose, but I think we could have. Yeah, I like the shove. I think calling is a pretty significant mistake. And yeah, because if you look at this hand, right, king jack. Let's say the river is like a queen. Villain is going to check behind. River's an ace, is going to check behind. River's a spade or a heart or even the 3 of diamonds. You know, he might just check behind. So we're going to lose a lot of value. But at the same time, he'll just put us on a flush draw or whatever, and he will call. So I like the shove a lot. Good play. I would have preferred a bet, but it happened to work out just right. Maybe you had to read on this player, right? Maybe you had to read that he likes to overplay his hand. In which case, checking is perfectly fine. I would call a squeeze here with ace jack suited if you do get squeezed. Deep in position versus a guy with an Ajax logo. So this 10-7-5 is pretty good for the small blind flat calling range because you can have sets and overcards and straight draws and flush draws, etc. So you have to be a bit careful. Now, this hand has pretty good backdoor bluffing ability. At the same time, you also have pretty decent showdown value, right? So we can first off, we can start bluffing with like 9 high, jack high, queen high, king high. This hand is a little bit better as a check behind because, I mean, you can just win sometimes. 9 is not the greatest card, even though we do turn a gut shot. If villain bets a reasonable sizing, I think we have to continue here. We do beat queen jack, king queen. Maybe a hand like ace 8 or ace 6, some flush draws. We also have 2 overs on a gut shot, so it's not a great spot by any means, but I think we can continue. So yeah, I think you're a little bit too fit or fold in a lot of spots sometimes. You have to be. I mean, I understand that it's difficult for him to, be very far behind, but at the same time, I think we could have called there. Now, had he bet like twice the pot, easy fold, right? Well, it seems like we're playing 20 VPIP, and 19 of that 20 is aces, and the other one is kings. King 8 suited, sometimes 3-bets, sometimes call. And these king high flush draws play pretty well as a check raise. However, we don't get to because villain checks behind. When villain checks behind here on the flop, he's repping a couple of trapped queens, but he's mostly repping like jacks or ace king or some kind of give up. So I actually wouldn't mind if you go with a really big bet here on the turn, get him to fold ace high. I don't think the average NL50 player snap checks behind a queen here. He should trap a queen sometimes, but I don't think they often do. And now we bets half pot. I think we should just end up calling. We have an overcard that's live potentially. We have an 8 which is potentially live. We have a flush which is usually live. So yeah, I think we should call. Okay, so this is definitely not acceptable, as in you should definitely end up bluffing your hand or you should end up check calling. So I don't mind you check calling if you think you have showdown value, but if you believe he has ace high, I mean, you still have the equity to call, right? If he has ace high, if you think he has ace high, why don't you bomb the turn and get him to fold the turn and maybe fold the river? So yeah, I think I understand that with a king high flush draw you don't always want to lead, but check fold is too nitty. So it seems that, I like the fact that you're not too call happy against aggression, because most of these guys are not too aggressive, but you're pushing it a bit too much. As in, it seems like you're a bit too easy to push around in a lot of these spots. Or maybe, maybe your pizza was about to be delivered and you didn't want to be in any big pots in case the doorbell rings. That's definitely possible, but I think it's more likely that you just have to, push these guys around a little bit more. As in here, right? You've got ace king, easy squeeze. Ass kicker, snap call the cutoff. He's likely just pretty weak. He likely just has a hand like ace 10 offsuit like we saw the other player have a few minutes ago. Now we see 9-7-4. This is definitely not the greatest board because out of position has all the sets and 10-8 suited and probably 8-5 suited and 7-9 suited and 9-6 and 6-7 and overcards and no flush draws yet. I almost said flush draws. This is definitely a board on which you want to be careful. So with 4 is usually just check behind. It's a hand that can't really barrel too easily. It's got some decent showdown value. So I don't really like this bet too much. Snap call by villain. I wouldn't mind a bluff as much now, but I still wouldn't love it. And with ace king, unfortunately, you do block ace jack suited, although I'm not sure this guy needs ace jack suited in order to continue. I'd like to see a bet here, right? This board just smashes you. So let's see what happens eventually. So when villain tanks here is thinking about calling with ace high, I don't think he would have folded a pair. So I guess you had the best hand after all. Jack 10 suited, we can definitely consider 3-betting. Would go a little bit smaller than 9. And we see the cutoff, the small blind. We see the small blind snap call here. So when he snap calls here, he's repping as jacks and 10s and maybe queens and ace king and maybe has 10-9 suited. So it's a board that hits him quite well. So with jack 10, I probably wouldn't end up bluffing here. If you were to bet 7 blinds, I don't think he's going to end up folding very often. So yeah, so here it's tempting to say, oh, queen deuce deuce blank board, easy bet. But if you think about it, villain is probably folding this flop 15% of the time, right? He's virtually never folding. So don't take too many hands that have no equity and just keep on betting them, right? So yeah, I expected that was going to happen. Ace queen easy 3-bet. This actually wouldn't be the worst hand to triple barrel, right? As in you block some suited queens, you block ace jack suited and stuff like that. It wouldn't be the worst hand to triple barrel. It's just something you don't want to make a habit out of because you're barreling against a fish with a pretty strong range, right? So if you ever wanted to do it, this wouldn't be the worst hand to do it with. So, the issue is that you're trying to make villain now fold jacks, 10s, 9s, whatever, and you have a jack and a 10 in your hand, right? So that's the main downside of this hand. So when he snap folds there, it tells me at a hand pocket 8s, pocket 9s, maybe pocket 10s or jacks, and he doesn't like that card. Ace queen is obviously an open raise. And that's a pretty sweet flop. So definitely looking to bet here, just on the smaller side. So when Villain here leads out for half pot, I mean, he's played 12-1 so far, which is insanely nitty. But he only led half pot. I would probably go ahead and raise here. Let's say he bet full pot, right? It's not just about the 3 extra blinds, but now he's representing a hand that could be ahead of yours. But when he bets 3, it's quite unlikely that he's ahead. Oh, this is so ugly. Oh, guys, I'm gonna have to sit up straight for this one. So Nefim leads, and I think he usually just has something decent, like, you know, Queen 10, Queen Jack, whatever. And then the big blind just raises into him. I mean, on the one hand, like, we block Queen 8 suited, right? And it's unlikely to have better. But if he does have better, we could be dead already, right? Or we'd be drawing to a backdoor full house, and that's not something you want to draw to. So, because, I mean, Villain could definitely have pocket 8s, and, you know, he could definitely have 5s. I mean, you've been very nitty in a lot of spots. If you folded here, I actually wouldn't blame you. There were a lot of spots where I thought folding was not reasonable. But if you ended up folding here, that actually would not be unreasonable. Because, I mean, you've got a hand which looks great on the surface, but it's a hand where if you get a lot of action, you're usually up against better, right? And obviously you're up against 2 players. Now, am I that worried about Nefim? No. But obviously we're very, very worried about Funny. And it looks like Funny just has it. And now he's got pocket 8s. Like, oh, can I still value bet? Yeah, I think I can. Yes, and he's got pocket 8s. Okay. All right. So, you know, I was about to pat myself on the back for saying, look, he just has pocket 8s. Good fold, bro. I actually don't mind. It turns out that my read was wrong. So I was talking about this in the group coaching I did earlier, right? So don't disregard me as a terrible player just yet. A read does not mean that you're right 100% of the time, right? A read means that you see that your opponent's doing something which may not be perfect, and because of that you think you're right more often than you shouldn't be. Than you should be, right? It doesn't mean that you're right 100% of the time and Funny just always has pocket 8s or pocket 5s, right? So, okay, so Nefim has King Queen suited, so he, you know, as we said, he bets half pot, so he probably had a hand worth betting half pot with. So we saw he was a bit face up with his betting strategy there, and he ended up calling down. Fine, right? So our read was spot on, absolutely spot on against Nefim. Our read was not quite spot on against Funny. I mean, this hand was definitely Funny. So the defend with King Deuce off is obviously questionable. You know, I do like raising in general in this spot versus Nefim's versus his lead. I like that a lot. And obviously, the combo selection is not good, right? If he's picking King Deuce off, he's obviously way overdoing it. On the turn, I don't hate the bet, but I don't love it. And on the river, his value shove is way too thin. So at least he was value betting, but we would have had him beat. Well, not by the river, right? By the river, we still would have lost. So in the end, I guess, still good fold. But the issue is, but on a serious note, the issue with Ace Queen is that it's very difficult for you to get the showdown, right? Because there's so many bad things happening, like backdoor flushes and kings and, you know, jacks and 10s and 9s hitting the turn in the river. So, and you have to worry about another player. So that's why it's difficult to call here in these multi-way raise spots, because it's very difficult to get the showdown unless you're willing to pay off a lot of money. So that was a funny one. Let's answer some questions now, guys. I was reading your PCG thread of 2015. You said you started from NL50 in the end of 2013. You're playing NL5K in 2015. Is this fast and crazy transition possible? Is it possible? Sure. But the thing is, fake realist, that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Because I was probably playing a bit underrolled, perhaps a little bit underskilled, right? So don't focus on just moving up stakes. Focus on maximizing your EV and playing within your bankroll. Not saying, oh, I played one session at 5100 even though I normally play NL100. Look, I'm a 10k reg. No, you're not, right? So that's not the max EV approach. Just focus on practicing good bankroll management, playing a lot, playing well, improving your games, playing good games, and then just move up gradually. Moving up fast is not necessarily the best option, right? Let's see. I'll give the order to beer and vodka to use the BTS and the avatar. What do you think? Well, he can if he wants to, but obviously we don't tell our students what kind of avatar they should have, right? So I mean, there's a bit of confusion there. With some people, they're like, oh, you have to play this game, you have to play like this. No, we are coaches, right? We advise our students. So we advise like, hey, these are the best games for your skills and bankroll and approach to play, right? These are the best games for you. But if you don't want to listen and play different games, that's fine with us, right? If you want to have a weird avatar, that's fine by us. If you want to play tough players, that's fine with us. We just prefer that you don't. So we don't tell our we don't tell our students to do anything. We tell them to work hard. Obviously, we can't force them. But we tell them to work hard. We tell them to be honest people. Obviously, that's something you got to be. But other than that, you don't have to be anything. How good was Boss Rutan? He was quite good, but he easily lost that fight against Kevin Random, and that was a robbery. That was a robbery for sure. So he's definitely very good, but maybe it was a different time back then. Nice read skills. As I said, reads are not supposed to be 100% correct, but we would have lost in the end, huh? Is this going to be on YouTube? Yes, it will be. Yeah, 80% I would say they have pocket 8s or pocket 5s for sure. Does this spot confirm the poker will always be beatable? No, I mean it's only one hand, right? So this could be like a very unlikely thing. But poker is definitely beatable. I mean, guys, okay. How can I convince you that that poker is beatable, right? We've got a business. It's called Bluff the Spot. We coach people on poker. Also, we stream and provide content and whatever. But the main purpose of Bluff the Spot is coaching people and being better. If we believe that poker is dying, especially at the lower stakes, why would we coach people? Why would we invest time and money and effort and stress and whatever? Why would we invest all that to help people if we believe we're in a dying industry, right? Why didn't we just start a VCR, like a VCR company or like a cassette company? Because there's no money in it, right? And there's no success in it, and there's no glory in it. There's no gratification or contribution to society in it. It's just dead. So the fact that we were willing to start a company and put so much time into this shows that we believe that poker has a bright future. Now, will it be like 2002 online poker? Probably not, right? But that doesn't mean that with good effort you cannot make it doesn't mean that you can make good money with a reasonable amount of effort and maybe a tiny bit of luck. So don't listen to those the guys who say that poker is dead. It's just not true. I do remember the 500 Zoom challenge. I remember reading about it, but I don't think I was playing then when it happened. Hi, is your introduction course too high level for a beginner? So we've got the high stakes course. I've got a high stakes course available. It is a little bit more advanced. That's why it's also a bit more pricey, right? So if you... I would say if you're a beginner, the course is probably a little bit too much for you. So what I would recommend is either signing up as a student, or probably even better, I would recommend the lab. And just a standard lab, right? The standard lab is also cheaper. The difference between our lab and other people's products is that we have interactive content, right? So, for instance, every single month we have a webinar. In fact, we have multiple webinars where people can even send in hands or questions or content, and we provide a whole presentation like theory, like let's say check raising the flop. We provide theory content, we answer questions, we look at hand examples, we may run some PioSims. I'll give you my personal advice. So our content is very interactive, presented by people who are winning a lot and who are very good. And also because a lot of them are former or current students, mostly former students. They understand what it takes to win in today's poker climate, right? Or what it takes to be a good coach, because they were recently coached themselves and they are currently coaching. So yeah, if you don't want to commit too much and maybe you're not as advanced just yet, I would definitely recommend the BTS Lab. All of these coaches, I know all of them. I've coached all of them. We all have a similar style of play, but of course still different outlooks. So all of these guys are excellent. And obviously my name is under this product. So if I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't be signing off on it. Did you watch any of the 501k action? Yeah, I was railing some of it. I mean, it seemed like there was some insane action going on, Isa. So yeah, pretty sick. I'm hoping we see $1 million pot. That would be really cool. Or if, let's say, if we see like a biggest pot ever. The biggest pot ever is like 1.3 million or something like that. 1.35 between Isildur and Antonius. When Antonius flops a straight in like a 5 or 6 bet pot in PLO. So yeah, I hope we beat that. That would be cool. That would be good for online poker, right? That would be really good for poker. Limitless is easily the best player in the world right now. Not only adds up, but overall when it comes to cash. That's your opinion, Peter. And by the way, I know Limitless watches the streams or he watches the YouTube videos because I was chatting to Limitless a few days ago, and and all of a sudden he was like, out of nowhere, he's like, hey, why do I always get a 7 out of 10 whenever you stream my hands? And I'm like, well, next time you're gonna get a better rate, because he was watching some of the older videos. So he's watching my videos or he's watching the stream. So I don't know what he's been up to, but shout out to Limitless, great guy. Opinion on him on Joe Ingram. I actually saw that. I mean, it is what it is, right? It's he and I are very different people. In fact, complete opposites. But say what you want about Victor, he's a great guy. He's a very nice guy, and also he's great for the game, right? Obviously, he's willing to put himself out there. He's willing to do, he's willing to produce content or go on shows. He's willing to play big, so he's great for the game. So all of you guys are probably going to make a couple more bucks this year because of him. And you should be grateful for that. Combined with the fact that he's a great guy. Do you think Meg Boyfriend is the best? Heads up? No. He's very good. I mean, he's put a lot of work into his game. I know that for a fact. So he's definitely very good. Is he the best? No. Yeah. The best, he's not. Why don't the UFC have any new Dutch stars? Well, Mousasi is very good, but he left the UFC, so... Yeah, Overeem is getting older, right? So, I mean, kickboxing is huge in the Netherlands, but MMA is not. So, that's why you don't see many. We have Jermaine the Randomie. She's the number 1 contender, and she's Dutch. So, she actually fought Amanda Nunes for the title in her last fight, and she actually knocked her down twice. All right, let's play a few more hands. In fact, I don't have to play at all. I'm just going to watch. I'm just going to watch and talk shit. Janine de Leeuw. That's I would bet a kidney that person is Dutch and female. Janine is a somewhat common Dutch name, and de Leeuw means the lion in Dutch. Jack 3 we can't defend with the high rake. Yeah, I bet a kidney she's Dutch. I mean, I have 2 of them anyway, right? I wouldn't bet my liver. Queen 6, I would like you to see you defend. Yeah, so I mean, if you're folding King 4, you definitely have to fold Queen 6 because Queen 6 is worse than King 4. So you're probably like a little bit inconsistent with that, but I mean it's close, right? I mean it is very close. But yeah, King 4 would have been a defend, and I believe Queen 6 is as well, even with the high rake. So with King Jack, I mean, the 3-bet was small, which helps us be a bit looser. But then again, King Jack is a terrible hand to play in the 3-bet pot in the sense that, you're offsuit, you're dominated, you're not, you're not that connected. So I would just fold. Now, big difference between King Jack suited and King Jack offsuit, for sure. All right, I've put in my request for lunch, but we've got like over half an hour left. 8-6 easy raise. So against his smaller stack, I would like to see open raise a little bit smaller. He's going to have a pretty decent spot shoving on you here. Will he do that? Probably not. But also because you're out of position, he's going to mess with you a little bit. He's going to raise a lot of flops, shove a lot of turns, and put you in bad spots. 9-8 suited is close. It's an overrated hand, but it is a decent one. So if your opponent's quite loose and aggressive, continue. If he's a big net, maybe you can fold. Can't blame you for calling. Okay. Bittersweet. You know, we flop a flush draw, but not a great one. We block 9s and 8s, which is great. Ace King, I actually wouldn't mind if we just value bet for value bet and protection bet here. We could potentially turn our hand into a bluff on later streets, but if Luca had a big pair, he would have 3-bet. So maybe he has like 6s and you're behind, but you know, he's not going to apply too much pressure with that type of hand, and the big blind should have really hit this board himself. The Hog Dog, I like that name. So yeah, I would have liked to c-bet with Ace King here. And the Hog Dog c-bet small. On such a dry board where both of you have quite a few good hands, I would like to see you check raise quite aggressively. So not always going to check raise this hand because it's a weak flush draw. You'd have to fold to a shove, right? And obviously if you hit a flush, you could still lose. But it is a board on which we get to check raise quite aggressively. 10 deuce, with low rake you could continue, with the high rake you cannot. So we actually check raise around 3x. That makes the shove much less attractive, right? Because there's 38 big blinds out there, so he would have to shove, he'd have to shove 90 behind. If you made it like 20, it would be much more attractive. And I would like to see you fold against Lucas bet here. Looks like he just has a jack or a 9. Maybe like a thin value bet with 7s and you still lose. Now, you seem to immediately want to bet. Think about it, right? You've got, the turn is an ace. You could have a hand like maybe 3s, deuces, 4, 5, ace, jack, ace, 3. So you have some good hands. Maybe you have an ace-high flush draw. But you also just have a lot of hands like queen 10 of diamonds that don't want to bet particularly, or not always at least. Or you have like weaker check raises. So this is not a spot in which you just blindly want to bet. I get it. You have a flush draw. And, you can't really check call your hand. So in that sense, betting is best. But be careful betting on this card because it's not a very good card for you. You have to be careful here. Obviously, your opponent has aces every single time, right? You never do. Your opponent has jacks every single time. You never do. So be careful in this card. King Queen, I don't mind you 3-betting. King Jack would be a fold. Ace King, obviously, or Ace Queen would be always a 3-bet. This one is closer, but I don't mind a 3-bet. So villain actually folded. One of the bad things about your particular hand as well is that if let's say villain had pocket 9s, he would just bet call the flop and then fold the turn, right? But you also block 9s and 8s, which would end up probably folding. All right, nothing going on, so I can eat a couple of blueberries. Hungry as hell. $10-8 is a loose open. So 10-8 is a loose open raise, but I do think it would be a good one. Once we see that in a few seconds. There was a player in the big blind. He didn't have a full stack, so unless you believe he's very aggressive, you could probably attack him. Now, I'm not saying you should open super wide on the button with fish in the big blind, but maybe a little bit more. Easy raise and easy call with 4s. 4s are not that difficult to play on most boards, as in you can just easily raise your set or easily fold. This is one of those few hands where, kind of in the middle. Villain checks behind, which is something you don't see very often. Most people check behind, but it seems like Tony Robbins told him to check behind. The 8 is not a card he should hit too much. He should mostly hit like the ace and the king. So I wouldn't hate if you go for like a bit of a face-up value protection bet, but checking would be standard. Against a good player, checking would be standard. Against a bad player, betting would make a bit more sense. And when he now quickly checks behind, he could be trapping, but it looks like he's got ace high. So I wouldn't hate if he ended up betting small. I wouldn't hate it. So he has king 8. Okay. That's one of the few 8s he does hit. But queen deuce deuce is a board on which you can probably see bet your full range. You don't really need to check much on that board. Ace Jack would be too light to call 4-bet. I would have sometimes 3-bet Ace Jack if I had the big blind folded. Queen 8 is close, 3-bet and call. We can do both. This player's playing 21-17. He's on the tighter side. I don't mind you 3-betting here. Obviously, we're just rooting for a fold because our hand is not great. 10-8-6 is definitely a board on which you would have to be careful, right? Villain is going to have some hands like 6s and 8s and perhaps 9-7, and it's like 10-9 and ace-10 and king-10. So you have to be careful. So with mid pair, with medium kicker, with no blockers to the nuts, I would just check behind. Queen Jack, I would just call, especially at like 40 something big blinds. If you get shoved on, if you 3-bet, that would be a disaster. And on Jack 3 deuce, the standard play would be to bet your whole range. The deuce and the 3 don't hit villain very often, and the jack is a good card for both, right? But there's also nothing happening when it comes to flush draws. Not many straight draws going on, so this is a dry board, right? You are ahead because you raised pre-flop, and this board doesn't really change anything. You're still ahead. Can't blame you for betting the Queen Jack, especially against a potentially weaker player. And I don't mind if you bet again. Now, Krish ends up betting here, and it's kind of a bittersweet spot again. On the one hand, obviously your hand is the best hand very, very often. On the other hand, you don't have that many really, really good hands here, so I'd actually like to see you just call. You also have a spade for protection. So I'd actually like a call here. Also, if let's say in game, are you really going to raise many bluffs here? If you believe this guy's just a face-up recreational player, maybe raise. But I think we should end up calling. Yeah, I don't like this play too much. We're quite far behind on this board, so when we have one of those few trappy hands, we just got to call him. So, and we get shoved on, and villain has ace-jack. It is a bit of a face-up spot by him, but I understand calling. Jack 9, I think we can open raise sometimes. Jack 8 deuce is a board which is kind of dry, right? As in the Jack and the 8 are both good for both of you. The deuce doesn't do anything. So it's a board on which you can be quite aggressive. I think you don't really need to bet so big. Yeah, I think you don't need to bet so big. Also, we've talked about this, right? We've talked about why I don't like that sizing you use. So you know about this one, so you can do better. So I'd like to see a bit of a bigger bet here. Actually, I'd like a smaller bet, but if you're going to bet big, you might as well bet even bigger. This hand I could imagine being an occasional bluff sometimes, right? You can use your 9 and your king of clubs to bluff some rivers with. At the same time, we've got so many bluffs, like queen 10, queen 9, 9, 10, 9, 7, 4, 5, 6, 5, ace 4, ace 5, clubs. Maybe sometimes barrel end like king, queen. So you're barreling all these types of combinations would make you quite aggressive, so be careful. If we were to bet, I'd definitely like to see an overbet. So, yeah. Definitely like to see a smaller bet on the flop, but a big bet on the turn. That's a really big bet. So I guess what you're trying to do is, block hand. You're trying to bluff on a 10 or a club river, I guess. I think that's your plan, especially on a club river. 10 of clubs river would be awesome. Okay. So I don't like the execution of this hand at all, but I do like the general idea of trying to be a bit aggressive against these opponents and trying to run him over, right? Well, that's a sweet flop. Looking to check raise. We saw ass kicker. We saw him cold call in a spot early against 3x. He could be a little bit weaker potentially. So I would definitely be looking to check raise here. This is a board of... but then again, he did bet third pot, which is a good betting strategy here. So, yeah, this hand in pie would get raised like 95% plus. So if you believe this guy's crazy, just barrels all in with every hand, sure, call sometimes, right? But as a standard, you want to raise here. If you believe this opponent's good, you can raise. You should raise. King 10, sometimes 3-bet, sometimes call. I do suspect that you're under 3-betting here. I've seen like 3, 4, 5 hands that were sometimes 3-bet, sometimes call, and you're calling all of them. So, King 10 is a 3-bet sometimes, right? So, is it a call? Sure. So, from one hand, I can't really judge whether or not you're playing right, but I've seen quite a few hands that were sometimes 3-bet, sometimes call, and you seem to always be taking the passive option. So, your 3-bet from the big blind is probably a bit tight. And this hand is kind of funny, right? It's kind of similar to the 9-8, except for the fact that this is a single raise pot. I wouldn't mind seeing you check here and like double check raise. I also wouldn't mind seeing a bet, of course, because we've got a set and, villain can easily have a good hand. And king 10 suited, we just gotta let it go. If we had a backdoor flush draw, we'd obviously never fold. We'd have a combination of call as well as check raise. Yeah, but with 2 spades in your hands, you know, it's just more likely villain has a backdoor flush draw, and he, you know, he continues to play his hand. King 9 suited would be a little bit loose. King 10 we could 3-bet. 6-5 jack looks like an instant board, but it's actually not that great for you, right? Because the villain definitely has more 5s and 6s than you do. He also has a lot of the offsuit straight draws, and the jack's pretty good for him. So you have to be a bit careful on this board. Shafty, I like that name. And he bets like 40% pot, which I think is a pretty cool sizing. Check raising here would be too aggressive. So if you had hand like king 10 suited, of course, check raising perfectly fine. King 9 offsuit, however, I think is too loose. Unless you believe this guy stabs too much and just is kind of fit or fold, this would be loose. And with ace 4, you kind of see the same thing, right? I see you about to click the call button. Ace 4 gets 3-bet. Always? No, definitely not, but sometimes, right? So I do suspect that, again, that you don't 3-bet these types of hands often enough. And it looks like you're listening. It looks like you're listening. All right, good job. I like it. Obviously, we're not always 3-betting this hand, but ace 4 is sometimes a 3-bet. You can't just 3-bet aces and kings only. Ace king, obviously, easy 4-bet. I'm going to call it off. Obviously, not very happily, but we got to call it off. And with ace 4, I don't mind seeing a c-bet here. Our hand has pretty good backdoors. Has an overcard, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. Villain will probably have jacks 100% of the time because he called MP versus big blind. And that's a pretty good card, right? We hit a flush draw. But let's go back to ace king first. So this board is very questionable. I mean, queen 10-9 is a board that really should hit him. He can have sets, he can have some straights, he can have some 2 pairs, he can have some pair plus draws. So this is not a board you can just like blindly quarter pot and, you know, move on to the next hand. Ace king here is definitely sometimes a bet. I'd like to see you bet here. But it's definitely not a board you can bet with your whole range. Bittersweet card, right? I mean, villain snap checks, but you should expect to get check raised sometimes. If we bet, we just bet small. And we check again. We're kind of a bit afraid of the... Yeah, we're a bit afraid of the check raise all in. And the fact that villain just shoves here within 2 seconds kind of shows that he was probably chopping on the turn. I mean, our hand is in theory great to call with in the sense that we block aces, we block ace queen, we block king jack. But the thing is, like, what is villain bluffing with, right? He would have to, like, snap shove here with 8-7 or 6-7. He would have to take a hand like jack 10, realize he has no showdown value, and turn that into a bluff. So is that possible? Absolutely. If I were playing this hand against an aggressive high-stakes reg, I would probably call, right? Because I think they're capable of bluffing at an appropriate frequency. But does the average NL50 player who called a call for about that position just snap shove 6-7 high here? Probably not, right? Probably not. So I do think we can end up folding here. Is that exploitative? A little bit. But remember, guys, we're playing NL50. We're playing guys who are pretty good, but not great. And very unsurprisingly, he shows up with a hand like this. I do like his line a lot. I like the fact that he checked the turn. If I had to rate his hand, I would give him at least an 8.5. But, I mean, guys, keep it simple, right? Like, yeah, on the one hand, your hand is great to call with. On the other hand, how often do you really see people bluff there? At least at, like, NL 1K and below. Not so frequently. So what's just important, let's go back to the hand. What's just important is that you don't just check back like, jacks and ace king, but you also like check back aces sometimes on this flop, right? Or queens, or like king jack suited. So you can actually call this hand. If you always show up with one pair, then, villain's going to shove on you and you're always in a shitty spot. So it's important to also check back some really good stuff and, be able to fight back on their streets. By the way, we're almost at 300 viewers. That would be really cool. I was going to say I'll take off my pants if I hit 300 viewers, but they're already off. So anyway, let's go to the next hand. Actually, let's answer a couple of questions first, and then we'll go to the next hand. Can you get Ben Affleck on next week's stream? I wish. Yeah, it would be fun. I don't really know Ben Affleck much. I don't know anything about him other than the fact that he played on Gone Girl. I also know some poker rumors. There's some guys who play with him live sometimes, and they say he gets shit-faced drunk and starts yelling and whatever. Not in a mean way, just he's like a loud drunk apparently. So, but I don't really know much about him. He's probably a nice guy. So, yeah, I don't know. Would be cool if we can get him on, but I mean, I have no contact info. So, honestly, put it like this. If I knew Ben Affleck, I would never get him on. If I were, let's say, friends with him and let's say we play poker, why would I show that to you guys? And then maybe some other guys will play, right? Why would I do that? So, I mean, why would I do that? So, no, you will never see Ben Affleck on this stream. Maybe I'm friends with him, you just don't know, right? But obviously, if I were friends with him, I would never tell you. But I'm not. Let's see. Who's GayVork2929 on Stars? I don't know that person. I've seen the name, but I don't know who he is in real life. If you look at like the most players, I know who they are. I know their Skype name, shit like that. But I don't know that guy. I don't know everybody. The players like Linus, Limitless, Big Blind Bats who play 80 counter K, they all play all by themselves. Okay, I can tell you, Limitless is playing by himself. A lot of the guys, I mean, not me, maybe I'm not mentioning specifically those guys. I'm not going to give any details other than Limitless. I know a lot of guys. I know how much they would be selling roughly, or I actually know specifically who they're selling to or what they're selling. I'm obviously never going to say anything about that under any circumstance, but a lot of players are selling. The vast majority of the regs in that game are selling. It's obviously not that many regs, right? So, is True Teller selling? I would be absolutely shocked. Right, but so yeah, guys like True Teller were super rich, definitely not. But Victor, no. But a lot of guys are selling. I'm not saying that the other guys you mentioned are selling. I'm not going to give away any information. But if you're playing, what was the game like? 501k, right? Is there with a straddle or without? I'm not quite sure. But yeah, if you have like those games, it's just so big. There's just only a handful of people who can afford, and the game is so big that even if you want to gamble, you can't really afford to, right? Because it's just so insane. The pre-fill Bible includes fixed ranges versus good strategies, but you have to adjust to your opponents. Absolutely. Great comment, Paulo. I mean, obviously, every player is different, right? So we can't give you like 1,000 charts versus like every type of player. That's just not doable. So these charts work fantastically well against good players. And if they are a little bit worse, obviously you adjust a little bit more. And if they're insane, obviously you adjust even more, right? So it's important that you look at statistics and like sizing and timing and metagame to figure it all out. If you have a guy with 3 bets, 5% blind versus blind, you cannot call the same range. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was more of a statement by you, but I absolutely agree, Paulo. Great comment. Richie has subscribed to Twitch Prime. Thank you, Richie. Appreciate it. Ace King seems like an obvious fold. So, yeah, I mean, I get it, right? You've been watching a lot of high-stakes replays. You see good blocker calls. Okay, fine. But remember, a lot of these guys are kind of nitty, right? So you should not call the same range at NL10K as an NL50. Have you ever taken a long break away from the table when I was in an upswing? I have this bad habit of getting a bit lazier when I'm going on an upswing, but working my ass off when I go on a downswing. That's not a good thing. But no, I never really take many breaks. I've started going on vacation a little bit in the last few years, but I don't really take long breaks. So lately my red line has been dropping like crazy. Does the lab provide info on how to fix this type of leak? I don't believe we have a specific video yet on like how to improve red line, although we might. But we talk about that in every session, right? Like focusing on aggression, like how to improve your aggression, how to find more pots to win, especially the small ones that a lot of people don't care about. They only care about the big ones. So yeah, we definitely work on, a lot of students, probably 95% of students could work on the red line, right? So we focus on that a lot. Like, do we have a specific red line improvement video? I don't believe we do yet, but we'll make it eventually. Will we make it within a week? Obviously, that's unlikely, but we do focus on that type of stuff, right? I mean, if your red line is off, it just means that in every single spot, you're probably a bit too passive or just not winning enough, right? So we focus on improving every spot. So as long as you watch videos on all kinds of situations, you're going to do just fine improving your red line. You know me. 1/3 pot c-bet has become quite common in certain spots. What condition leads you to following it? Generally on dry boards that are quite good for you. So basically where villain has a lot of air and the bet size doesn't really matter too much, because he just has nothing, right? So it generally happens on dry boards that are favorable to the raiser, or just dry and don't really improve anybody. So the raiser's still ahead because he raised pre-flop, and the caller obviously merely called and didn't show any strength. Our top high stakes regs work on the game by themselves, or do they talk hands with, amongst others? Everybody is different, right? I'm sure some people don't study at all. Some people study with others. A bit of everything. So I study by myself, but I also talk to others quite often. So yeah, I would imagine that most guys have like a little group of friends, that are all quite good, and they work together. If one had solver preflop ranges without ante but play an ante game, do you need to play completely new ranges? Not completely new ranges, but you'd have to play looser. It also depends on how large the ante is. So on every site, the ante tends to be a little bit different. On starts, for instance, it tends to be 0.2 big blinds. What is good software to improve heads-up skills? Any type of GTO software. So I use PileSolver, but I'm sure the other ones are good as well. I can't really vouch for them because I haven't really used them. Actually, we've actually finished the footage, so that's perfect. I'll say that our our hero played well. I give him an 8 out of 10. In a lot of spots, he was not aggressive enough, and also his c-bets. Probably what he would have to work on most, and what we will work on, is his c-bet strategy on the flop, working on more aggression, and also working more towards changing your strategy based on your opponent. So overall, he played well. I didn't see any blunders whatsoever. It's just about sharpening everything up, right? So if you look at his play versus an NL10K reg's play, there's not a gigantic difference, right? Like the 10K reg just plays a little bit sharper in every single spot, and all those tiny little edges result in a pretty decent edge. But it's not as if they're going to just play their hand 3 times better in every spot. So anyway, thanks for joining, guys. If you're interested in the BTS lab, we have a standard lab, we have an advanced lab. You're more than welcome to join. Everybody who's given feedback so far has been super positive. Even if it's not positive, we'd like to hear, right? As long as it's constructive and not trolling, we'd like to hear it. We'd like to hear about it.